Clearly understanding how information security governance works is extremely important both on your exam and for your professional career. You need to understand how the policies, the standards, guidelines, procedures, and baselines work together, what each of them does and what they do not do. Starting out with the policies, those are mandatory. They're high level, they're not specific. They can contain keywords like patches, updates, must use strong encryption, but they're not going to be more specific than that. They will not contain specific OS, what type of encryption, or what type of vendor. These are normally decided upon by C-level executives, and we would use those to then build the standards. The standards are most likely where you come in. They're also mandatory, and they will describe the specific technology, but it's still at a semi-high level. This could be all laptops must be Windows 7, 64-bit, and have 8 gigs of memory. Guidelines, on the other hand, are non-mandatory. These are discretionary recommendations you can choose to use or not. And then the procedures, which are also mandatory, are the very specific in-depth, both step-by-step guides and specific documentation of each element. This is where you'd find the specific encryption type, must use AES-256 for instance, or the vendor. All access switches must be this and this Cisco version with at least this version of iOS. This would probably also be completed by you or at least your team. And then finally we have baselines or benchmarks. Those are non-mandatory. We could have a rule saying, for server hardening for instance, we could have a rule saying we must follow this baseline or be more secure. Then the implementer would have the freedom to follow the baseline to the letter or ignore it completely or parts of it as long as those parts are more secure. How it's done obviously has to tie back into all the other policies, procedures, guidelines, and standards. We can't just change how we implement things from one server to the next. The larger your environment gets, the more important consistency in configuration becomes. Users often pose the largest security risks. It's not because they're malicious or they're trying to compromise us. It's just that they don't know any better, or it's just easier doing it this way. And to mitigate some of these problems, we ensure that our employees have the right training and that we raise their awareness and know the difference. Training is you giving them the knowledge. They can choose to use it or not, and if they choose not, training really does nothing. Whereas awareness is what we want. That's the end user changing their behavior. And most often they do this because they got the right training. Think back to the analogy earlier of the super secure house where someone left the door open. We're only as secure as our weakest link, and most often that's the user. The attackers know that. They're going to try to exploit it. So for us to succeed, we need to ensure that the users understand and uses the IT security knowledge that we share with them. We need to teach them at their level and make them understand why it's important. When we hire people, we also do background checks on them. This is an administrative security control. We make sure they are who they say they are, that they have good references, degrees. We check on their employment history, the criminal records. Some places can even check on your credit history. This is not very common, but it is done at times. And often we also have staff sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, which basically means they're not allowed to talk about company proprietary or secret information with anyone. If they do, they're in breach of the NDA, and they can be fined or put in prison. And then the other end of the employee life cycle, if an employee keeps breaking the rules or compromising our security, both advertently and inadvertently, we want to train them, we want to support them, we want to give them a chance to succeed, but if nothing changes, we might be forced to terminate them. In that case, we'll coordinate with HR to ensure that we turn off their access at the time they're being terminated. If we turn it off too soon, they might figure out what's going on and do damage to the company. If we turn it off too late, they might still be able to access company data and files after they've left the company. That's also a security risk. So shutting it off as they're being terminated is important. We also have to have a very clear policy on how we handle vendors, consultants, and contractors. We need to ensure that they adhere to the same strong standards that we do. If they keep any of our data on their devices, they need to match our policies and procedures. And as the risk advisor or the IT security manager, you do your due diligence and you do care before they're allowed to access your facilities and your network. The same goes when we outsource offshore, which is just paying someone else not there to do your work. This can be payroll, HR, it can be IT security, it can be anything that can be done somewhere else and often less expensive. But here as well, we need to make sure we do a firm and complete risk analysis. While the lower price might look nice, it might come with a much higher hidden cost if our data is lost or compromised. And with offshoring, we need to ensure that the company, and preferably the country, has the high security standards we do. Do you due diligence and do you do care? On this graph, you can see a breakdown of internal versus external threats, and a huge chunk of that is employee actions and mistakes, 24%. This is where our training and awareness can make a difference. And on this one, as well as all the other ones, our layered defense approach and employee awareness can help us. But it's very important we train our employees right. I've sat through many security presentations that are worse than watching paint dry. It's insanely boring. We need to ensure that we engage them, that they want to be there. This can be done through simple things like competitions, quizzes, or whatever you have, and then you test on them after. I've seen successful staff meetings where they explain there will be a reward for the team that does best, then a presentation on the IT security, and in the following weeks they send out phishing emails, and the group that does the best, that either reports them or just deletes them, wins a prize. I understand that it is tricking people into doing something you want them to, but it works. They should want to, not want to because you tell them.